Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the real threat to Rishi Sunak, and it's not immigration, it's not inflation, it's not even GDP. It's starting slowly, but Sunak's economic management is already being compared with that of Liz Truss within parts of the right wing. And that impact is being felt by the very voters the Tories must win back to avoid obliteration at the next election. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So Rishi Sunak made his 5 priorities: growing the economy, halving inflation, reducing the national debt, cutting NHS waiting lists, and stopping the boats. And you could say, okay, yeah, all of these are policies which would find general approval amongst different groups of Conservative voters, but none of which really get to the heart of their own priority. Essentially, ask yourself why anyone ever votes Conservative. They sort of know public services are going to suffer because they always do. They ultimately vote for one of two selfish reasons. First, for their authoritarian rhetoric. The Tories persuade some voters that foreigners should be banned and youths should be locked up for loitering on street corners. There are some voters who like this tough on immigration and law and order shtick. So those voters will often vote Conservative because they are the ones who seem to make the most extreme promises. They might now vote for Reform UK, given the Tories' well-publicised failures in these policy areas, mind you. But most Conservative voters are not really voting to make other people's lives harder. They're voting to make themselves better off. They want a higher standard of living, and they think they'll get it with the Conservatives. Oh, well, the Conservatives like to charge you less taxes. That means more money in my pocket. As soon as they think Labour will give them more money, they vote Labour. And that's what we're seeing now. And this is where Sunak is making a grievous error. Growing the economy sounds good, but not everyone benefits. Also, when he talks about growing the economy, everyone knows he's not on for growing it by very much. You know, maybe we'll grow the economy by 0.5% this year and everyone will go, hurrah! That's not really going to add much to people's incomes. Even those people whose incomes does tend to rise with inflation, which is not public sector workers, of course. Halving inflation, well, that sounds good because that means things won't be as expensive. But actually, no, they will. They'll be more expensive. And the thing is, they'll be getting more expensive. The rate at which they'll be getting it more expensive, even if inflation's halved, is still faster than most people's incomes are growing. Reducing the national debt, that might also sound good, but in reality, actively trying to reduce the national debt is the lowest of all priorities during a global economic squeeze. If anything, national debt goes up at that time, and that's fine. Don't worry, though, because Sunak isn't actually doing anything to reduce the national debt. None of Sunak's the 3 priorities connected to the economy actually raise the standard of living for these voters. You know, these voters, to vote Conservative again, have to see their incomes rising faster than their cost of living, not more slowly. And there is a huge cost to Conservative voters which is not taken into account with the inflation figures, and that is mortgages. The Conservatives depend upon homeowners believing that the Conservatives are the party of homeowners. The reason they spent the last decade cutting back on certainly affordable home building is because existing homeowners don't like the developments. It's the reason why Sunak U-turned on the manifesto promise to implement house building targets for councils. Their voters don't like it. They've got a home already. That's all they care about. They don't want new development stunting the growth in the value of their home. The reason why some former Labour strongholds like Hartlepool were tilting towards the Conservatives for years before the political chaos of 2019 was because younger people were leaving they were going to university and then getting the better jobs over there because there was nothing in Hartlepool and similar knackered industrial towns like it, leaving behind the people who were already more likely to vote Tory, the homeowners. You increase the proportion of people more minded to vote Conservative, inevitably it flipped Conservative. Nothing to do with any policies at the time. So if you're a party dependent upon homeowners for your support, the last thing you need is policies which raise the costs of those mortgages. Because never mind inflation rising. And even for people, as I say, whose income does tend to grow quite well if the economy is growing, all of those gains are wiped out by the hundreds of pounds a month extra that homeowners are seeing being added to their mortgage payments. Anyone not on a fixed term mortgage right now is having to cancel holiday plans and more just to make sure they can keep on top of their ever rising mortgage payments. In fact, on a monthly basis, they're finding out their mortgage is going up a bit more. They're not getting the higher standard of living that voting Tory was supposed to bring them. And although the government are trying to crow about the latest inflation figures out this week, showing a significant drop, oh, it's in single figures, that's good, isn't it? It did not drop as much as predicted. It was predicted to drop lower, which means that the figure is still currently worse than it was expected to be at this point when Sunak promised to halve it. So what's going to happen to his promise? But the outlook for mortgage holders without a fixed rate just got worse, and Sunak will pay for it. The gilt market, that was all over the news after Liz Truss's kamikaze budget as the economy melted down. Then Sunak and Hunt came in, not quite at the same time, to take control of the wheel, steer the ship of state into calmer waters. Hurrah! The talk was of grown-ups being in charge at last. Truss's supporters were told to sit down and be quiet after nearly causing a run on the pound and wiping out a significant amount of value on pension pots. But now the Truss was right slogans are coming out. Why? Because the gilt market is currently looking very, very similar to the darkest days of Liz Truss. So now the Truss supporters are saying, well, what was the point of getting rid of her? She had all the right ideas. All right, you didn't like what happened to the economy. What was the point of getting rid of her if the supposed grown-ups are doing just as badly? The boring ones. The Daily Express seem to be reporting on this with glee, though you can also see the same issues being reported in Bloomberg and the Financial Times. Because the consequences of this new economic meltdown is that the Bank of England are going to end up pushing interest rates higher still. I cannot emphasise just how much this should mean to Tory MPs. Halving inflation, growing the economy by any realistic amount, cutting national debt, which he's not trying to do anyway. None of these are worth as much to people with mortgages which aren't fixed as just getting the interest rates down. Instead, they're going up. And imagine what it'd be like for those who are on fixed rate mortgages, but coming to the end of those terms, before the general election. They'll be going up by a mighty amount, all at once. All at once. They're not going to have to keep adjusting each month. In one go, they're going to find out, what's my mortgage? What? It's quite common for people when getting on the housing ladder to get pretty much the largest mortgage they can afford. You know, because especially if you think, well, your income's going to rise in 10 years' time, it's much more manageable than 20 years' time, it's easy. So you get the best, and it's especially the case these days when you have to squeeze your income for all it's worth to get any sort of property in some parts of the country. So you did that a few years ago, right? Your fixed rate period's about to end. It's going to cost big time because when these people got those mortgages, the Bank of England based interest rates were like almost zero. Now it's 4.5% and still rising. And it will keep rising until the economy is under control because the economy is getting worse. And despite the smug assurances of both Sunak and Hunt, neither of them have actually implemented a single policy to manage the economy. And I'm not being glib or churlish here because I'm a Labour supporter, because they didn't do enough, I'll say they didn't do anything. No, they've actually not implemented a single policy that is designed to either tame inflation or stimulate growth. They really haven't. They're just hoping that one of those figures comes down on its own and the other goes up just due to random chance. But wishing upon a star is not the best way to run a government. And we're seeing the consequences of that. We have one group of Conservatives who insist that Liz Truss's general idea of slashing taxes for the richest will somehow boost the living standards of everyone. Then you've got the other group calling out the nonsense, who were seemingly proved right by the collapsing economy at the time and took charge of the government. But now the Liz Looney Brigade are asking why Sunak and Hunt are presiding over similar levels of economic meltdown if they're so great and Truss was so stupid. If this was a reason to get rid of Liz Truss, why is this a reason to keep faith with Rishi Sunak? It's not an easy question to answer, and so the question will get louder. And with each new announcement of interest rate rises, Sunak's Tories will lose more votes. And with each mortgage holder who comes to the end of their fixed rate term and find out what Sunak's done to their mortgage payment, Sunak's Tories will lose more votes. And these mortgage holders, they represent a huge proportion of the voting public just in general. But an absolutely massive proportion of the Conservative voting public. Any Tory MPs prioritising any of Sunak's so-called promises over this have got no idea what's going on, but they are going to find out. Even the Daily Express is pointing it out today, so it shouldn't take too long for them. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.